Welcome to another edition of Global Conversations. My guest tonight, Vladimir Kozin. He's been on the show many times, an expert in nuclear treaties, nuclear weapons, war, but he also was stationed at the Soviet embassy in Kabul from 1972 to 1976. We're going to ask him about that time, but my first question, Vladimir, is going to hopefully put this situation in a historical perspective. Why did the Soviet Union go to Afghanistan in the first place, and then why did they leave?
The reason that the Soviet Union sent its military contingent to the Democratic Republic of Afghanistan, that was the name of the country, official name of Afghanistan at that time, because the Afghan leaders, especially the late president of Afghanistan, Nur Muhammad Taraki, asked many times the Soviet leaders to send our military contingent to Afghanistan to maintain stability and security throughout the entire country. The second reason was that there were rumors that time that the United States of America allegedly wanted to deploy medium-range nuclear-tipped missiles on the Afghan soils targeted at the Soviet Union. As to the first reason, the Afghan leaders have asked the Soviet leaders to send Soviet troops to Afghanistan 14 times, 14 times before we actually did, and it was in December 1979. The reason that we have pulled back our troops completely 10 years after that, exactly in 1989, was that we understood, actually our leaders have understood, that it doesn't matter how many troops the Soviet Union would amass in Afghanistan, or it doesn't matter how long the Soviet Union will stay in Afghanistan, all these efforts were doomed to failure. Why? Because the Afghans are such people, they mainly live in the mountainous area of Afghanistan and in some flat surfaces as well, especially near rivers and plateau. They cannot tolerate any kind of foreigners, any kind of intruders into their land. I would like to recall that the British Empire have conducted 3 wars in Afghanistan. 2 wars in the 19th century, and the last one, the third one, at the beginning of the last century, 20th. All 3 wars were lost. And the Afghans won, though technically and militarily, the Afghans that time have been rather weak and rather poorly equipped. We also stayed, as I said, for a decade, for 10 years. And we also have to withdraw our troops back to the Soviet Union from Afghanistan. No results. The same happened with the United States of America. The USA have stayed for 2 decades, 20 years, from 2001 to 2021, nearly 20 years. The same, no results. and the Afghans equipped poorly than the US military contingent in Afghanistan for these 20 years, and having no air support, no heavy caliber artillery and other heavy equipment, no electronic facilities to be used for reconnaissance, for targeting, firing system, but they have again forced the United States troops to come back home completely. I mean, it doesn't matter what country, whether it has nuclear capabilities or still has conventional weapons and conventional forces, it doesn't matter. Afghanistan, the Afghan state, cannot be conquered completely in the past, in the current days, and in the future as well. So any foreign leader who would like to send a military contingent to Afghanistan has to understand from the very beginning, it will be lost. No chances. People will suffer. I mean, the Afghans. His own troops will suffer. There will be heavy losses and injured and crippled people. And a lot of money will be spent for nothing. I mean, we have a Russian colloquial saying that this money will be burned into a smoke, a useless substance. So, Regis?
Well, it's well known that Afghanistan is where empires go to die. But I want to ask you something that is fairly well known. That Zbigniew Brzezinski convinced the Americans to send money and equipment to the Mujahideen to give the Soviet Union their Vietnam. Can you comment on that?
Yes, I mean, this is absolutely a crystal clear fact. And in doing so, in offering military and financial assistance, and by the way, moral assistance to the Mujahideen that time, Washington wanted to set up a fireplace near the borders of the Soviet Union, and wanted to invite us, the Soviets, to be engaged in heavy fighting in Afghanistan, where there will be no winners. I mean, in respect for foreigners, in terms of foreigners, in terms of any foreign troops, any foreign country. So Afghans have to decide their fate by themselves without any foreign interference. And as to and nowadays, we are seeing the same tactics invented in Washington highest ruling circles. They wanted us to confront with the current Taliban regime in Afghanistan by spreading rumors that allegedly the Taliban movement, or the Taliban Nizat in Pashto, or Tahrik Taliban in Dari or in Farsi, has really cooperated with Al-Qaeda. No. Al-Qaeda and the movement of Taliban in Afghanistan are totally different and politically differently motivated movements. So another speculation still nourished and articulated by many Western scholars and by Russian scholars as well, shame on them, that Taliban allegedly would like to go through the Central Asia, conquer Central Asian republics, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, Kyrgyzstan, and then go again further into continental part of the Russian Federation. But the Taliban movement does not have such plans. Some people say that in 1993, they wanted to penetrate into Tajikistan, crossing the common border, Afghan-Tajik border. But it's wrong, because the movement of Taliban has been created 1 year later, in 1994, but not in 1993. And highly competitive personalities who served in Tajikistan in 1993 told us that there have been no movement from Taliban in 1993 via Tajikistan into Central Asian Republic of the former Soviet Union. The same today, they do not have such plans. And militarily and physically and technically, Taliban does not have enough capabilities, does not have manpower to conquer Central Asian republics of the former Soviet Union and to invade the central part of Russia adjacent to the Central Asian republics. Regis?
Let me ask you a question following up on, we're talking about the Taliban. What are your thoughts on the government that they have just formed or are forming? And have they made an attempt to be truly representative of all the different groups or factions in Afghanistan?
You know, the song written and composed and sang by the ex-Swedish pop group called ABBA. One of the songs they invented and they sang was "The winner is taking all." The Taliban are winners. They have won the battle, the recent battle with the United States of America, plus several dozens of the American allies, NATO allies, and non-NATO allies and partners. Nearly 100 states participated in occupation of Afghanistan. So I've heard that the composed government of the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan, that's the official name of Afghanistan, the Afghanistan Islami Emirat in Pashto, or Emirat Islami Afghanistan in Dari or in Farsi, they are mainly composed of Pathans. Pathans like Russians for Russia. It's a core nation. It's a core nation in Afghanistan, Pathans. They constitute nearly 50% of the entire population, multinational country called Afghanistan. So they won, simply because the Taliban movement is composed mainly, ethnically, is composed mainly of Pathan population. Pathan. I studied the language of Pashto or Pahto. It's a self-name of the Pashto language. It's one of the official languages in Afghanistan, and it's nowadays is widely used. Like when I was there from 72 to 76, I was interpreter to His Excellency the Soviet Ambassador Alexander Mikhailovich Puzanov, and translated many talks between him and the Afghan leaders, and even the talks between Leonid Ilyich Brezhnev and Nur Muhammad Taraki, from Pashto into Russian and vice versa, from Russian into Pashto or Pashto. So they have won the battle. They paid a huge price. True, there are no ladies in the government, but in the past, when the king was the ruler of Afghanistan, Muhammad Zahir Shah, there were a lot of women in the government and in the parliament of Afghanistan, in the educational and health care system, etc., etc. But nowadays, Taliban would like to keep ladies and girls from politics and from West social life in Afghanistan. Is it something extraordinary? For us, Europeans and Americans, yes, it is. It's extraordinary. But for the Afghans, it's not. It's a part and parcel of their religious beliefs, their norms and traditions. And if we wish them to change a little bit the layout, ethnical layout in the government, or gender layout and participation in the government, we have to be patient, and we should be tolerant and wait. Nobody will force them to change their mind. So they have to come to a proper solution by stages for the time being. So nobody, I think, should criticize them for that, because they agreed that girl students and male students should sit in the same classroom, but separated with a curtain separating them. So what is wrong? In the former Soviet Union, soon after the Bolshevik Revolution of 1917, we had also separate classes. Girls and boys were not allowed to sit in one classroom together. They have been separated and occupied different classrooms. Later, in the Soviet Union, this practice has been changed, but nevertheless, we have had the same history. So I think that the world community should respect Pashtunwali. It's a code of honesty. It's a code of behavior of the Pathans. As I said, the number one nation in Afghanistan, the most representative, the highest in terms of quantity. But probably in the future, Afghanistan will come to a different path and will change its mind. It's quite possible. Regis, studio?
Well, I two things, and then I'll ask you another question. President Putin has said repeatedly that no other countries should try to impose their will or their customs or their laws or their religion on any other country. And he was speaking not just about Afghanistan, but certainly many of those other countries that the United States has tried to do regime change or build democracy.
Yeah.
And so I think he's been one of the strongest voices to say the Afghans need to do this themselves.
Regis, I fully agree with what Mr. Vladimir Putin, the Russian president, has said on that subject, on that matter. While staying for 4 years in Afghanistan, soon after I graduated from the Moscow State Institute of International Relations and have been posted to Afghanistan, as an individual, I understood this kind of dictum, this kind of demand many, many years ago, nearly 50 years ago.
Well,
and I persuaded my foreign ministry officials, when there have been debates whether to send our troops or not, I said them that, look, the British armed forces lost 3 wars in Afghanistan with no results. And nobody can conquer Afghanistan. We will sustain many losses. We will undermine our prestige and the world community. And I advised them not to send. I was opponent to sending our troops to Afghanistan. And look, though we have stayed for less than the Americans have stayed, 10 years versus 20 years, our losses have been much higher. We have lost 15,000 soldiers and officers completely killed, 50,000 men injured and crippled, and 303 persons as MIA, missed in action. Some of them have returned, some of them not. Decided better not, and stayed in the Asian countries, in Pakistan and in European countries as well. So we have gained no results as well. So why to repeat in the future? I mean, personally, as a human being, I'm appealing to all leaders of the world never to repeat the same mistake, never to come back to Afghanistan militarily, never send troops, never send military hardware, not stop bombing, stop using drones and other facilities to kill innocent people. They have lost too many people during this tragic years of occupation. Studio?
Well, another thing I was going to mention when you talked about the educational system where they have a curtain between the men and the women, I had to laugh. I did see a picture of that.
I have seen by myself.
Yeah, I saw a picture online and I had to laugh because I was raised and educated in Catholic schools in my home state of Maine, and there was no curtain, but girls were on one side of the room, boys were on the other, and the ones who had their faces covered completely were the Catholic nuns, the sisters who taught us. And so I had to think, we had a very similar thing when I was growing up. The boys, and they couldn't play with the girls outside, during recess or lunch, you were separated. So anyway, I want to thank you for that. Some very good insights. Now, I want to get back to the government that they've formed. Do you feel that they have made a real attempt to include the different groups? And
I don't think so. Regis, I don't think so that it is relevant at the current stage. Because first of all, the current government in Afghanistan, composed of Taliban personalities, they have to stabilize the situation in the country. They have to revive trade and financial transactions and make the situation in the country stable and secure, with Sharia law to be just well in place throughout the land, the country. So after that, probably they will come back to recomposition of the government. But currently, by the way, they proclaim that the current government is interim.
Okay.
It's interim. It's not final. It's interim. And any regime, especially having no experience in command and control of the country, like Afghanistan, has to be very cautious, very prudent, so not to disturb the situation and not to destabilize it once again, and not to let the civil war to erupt again and again. So, but probably because I remember when I arrived to Afghanistan in 1972, in August of that year, the parliament was working. Ladies were not covered by hijab, but some of them have been covered completely by burqa, means a kind of wardrobe covering the entire body from the head, shoulders, and the entire body of any lady who professed very tough religious beliefs. And only a part of this blanket, so to say, of burqa, was made of like a part enabling a lady to look through the entire world through cross bars, embroidered naturally. So not even eyes have been exposed, and nose have been exposed to the outsiders, to the pedestrians. But at the same time, on the other hand, there were ladies with open hand, without shawl, without pashima, etc., etc. So completely open, with the open head, hair, etc., etc. Using cosmetics, etc. But the time changed, and they have returned to the traditional norms and customs and traditional behavior, and nobody should criticize them for that.
Yeah, the pictures of young women back when you were there, I'm sure, and before that, were dressed, they looked very much like Western women.
Yeah.
They had skirts, they had, the hairdo that they had was typical of the time. And I think what's happened, and I'd like your opinion on this, I think in the West, those pictures have been so propagandized and compared to Sharia law, where the women are covered and some completely covered, and said, look, they were this way at one time, they have to change. And this is what you've been talking about, and I agree with you. Things changed, times changed in Afghanistan, and it's the Afghan people, as you have said, and President Putin have got to figure this out for themselves. Now, I want to ask you one more question about the Taliban, and then we'll move on to a couple of other, excuse me.
Yes, please go ahead.
Do you think there will be continued fighting between the Taliban and tribes or groups that are still going to resist? And it'll be sort of like civil war?
You mean in opposition entrenched at the Panjshir Valley?
Yeah, yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Well, as to Panjshir Valley, unfortunately, some Western circles would like to stir up tension using the Panjshir Valley factor, the factor of opposition as assembled in this part of Afghanistan. But look, Taliban has a lot of military hardware. They have grabbed from the regular armed forces from their own country, plus a lot of military ammunition and a lot of military hardware, helicopters, tanks, armored personnel carriers, mortars, artillery pieces, etc., from the American and NATO member states left in Afghanistan for good. So the Panjshir Valley opposition doesn't have such military capability. The Panjshir Valley, well, is mainly conquered by Taliban and controlled by Taliban. I don't know what is the proper percentage of the command and control of that area, but I think that without foreign assistance, without military assistance, without financial assistance from abroad, opposition in Afghanistan assembled at the Panjshir Valley or probably in some other areas of the country, like hotspots, small hotspots of resistance, they will not succeed in overriding the Taliban movement and replacing by other forces, simply because the Panjshir Valley opposition, they do not represent the Pathans. They're mainly Uzbek and Tajiks, Afghan Uzbek and Tajiks, not from Central Asian republics, but their own ethnic community. And I think that gradually Taliban will persuade the remnants of the opposition groupings at Panjshir Valley, persuade them to lay down their arms and to become loyal and faithful to the newly born regime, because Panjshir Valley opponents, they are Afghans, they're citizens of the same country. They are called also the citizens of Afghanistan. They are not foreigners. That's why there is no ideology for them and for Taliban to extinguish each other day in, day out. They have to understand this simple thing, simple truth to understand, that it will lead them to nowhere. They have to negotiate and agree to completely ban of hostilities, completely ban on arms resistance and arms fighting. Only dialogue, political dialogue.
I want to ask you this question because I have read it in the alt media, not from mainstream American or European media, that Russia and China have offered to assist in terms of economics, in terms of sharing political experience. And people are wondering if Russia and China are going to begin helping Afghanistan develop infrastructure. power stations, dams,
Mhm.
airports for civilians, interstate highway or intercountry highways. Is there any truth to any of that?
Yes, Regis, I haven't heard a detailed description what we are going to do in Afghanistan in the foreseeable future or in the distant future, because it's premature. My answer is like this. But nevertheless, we have had a huge experience in helping the former Afghanistan, even during the king of Afghanistan. Soon after the Bolshevik Revolution, we recognized Afghanistan, and they vice versa recognized the Russian Federation in 1919, a long time ago. So, and the Soviet Union stretched its helping hand to build hydropower station, then just bakeries, Polytechnical Institute, and other factories and plants in Afghanistan, built highways, just bringing big cities in that country. So why not? But unlike in the past, we have to ask our Afghan partners to pay back, I mean, in terms of money, to give as a grant in aid. We can send humanitarian assistance like foodstuff, some lubricants in small community, in small quantities. That's probably correct. But we cannot rebuild Afghanistan entirely, completely, because we by themselves need to rebuild our country economically, because still there are too many people living either below living standard or very close to these limitations. That's not good. It's not fair. We do not deserve this kind of level of assistance to our own citizens. We're still having pensioners. Their pension is not substantial. Not substantial. So, as to the People's Republic of China, well, why not? It depends on the current regime in Afghanistan. If they so desire, if they wish, they have to apply officially through normal channels of communications via respective ministries, like Ministry of Foreign Affairs, like Ministry of Trade, etc., Ministry of Agriculture. Yeah, we can't do it. Why not? Because I said we just had a very positive experience, historic experience in Afghanistan from 1919 until now. So, but first of all, we would like to ask Taliban to destroy an opium plantation of this poppy plantation in Afghanistan, which is the main producer of opium worldwide. And we put our fingers crossed and touch the wood, but we will ask them to return to the quite a fantastic results during the first tenure of Taliban ruling Afghanistan from 1996 to 2001, when they have deposed by other forces. But by the year 2001, Taliban managed to suppress poppy plantation and to lead opium production in Afghanistan and sending it to many countries all over the world completely till zero. So why not to repeat? They have experience in this field. In my country, for example, we are having annually up to 30,000 addicts, mainly youngsters, young generations, who are using this kind of highly virulent habit, smoking hashish, opium, etc., of different types. Previously, we had 50,000. So this is a subnormal situation. So we are hopeful that Taliban will be able to suppress this kind of menace, which flourished during the last 2 decades, when the US and other NATO member countries ruled Afghanistan. Look, by complete withdrawal of NATO forces from Afghanistan by the 31st of August this year, Afghans cultivated this poppy across 263,000 hectares. It's a tremendous space. We have to just help the Afghans. I mean, not only the Russian Federation, the People's Republic of China. We have to persuade the farmers of countries to forget about the poppy plantations and to come back to other normal agricultural cultivation.
I'm glad you raised this point about the poppy plantations, the opium, because over here, well, I say over here, in the United States, there's a lot of people in the alt media, people who are independent journalists, whatever you want to call them, who insist that this opium business was run by the CIA, because the CIA has done this. They did it in Vietnam, they did it in Thailand, and the opium trade is connected to the arms dealers, is connected to a lot of really high up people in the military making a lot of money. What are your thoughts on who is it in Afghanistan? Is it a whole lot of farmers, or is it like just a handful of oligarchs that own and run all these plantations?
Certainly, there are plenty of bosses who are just increasing this opium plantations across the country, because it's very easy to grow this kind of vegetations, and it produces a lot of money. So a lot of money. Other agricultural products require just much more efforts and a lot of investments. So, but I have seen a number of pictures from the immediate past that NATO troops guarded this kind of poppy plantations in Afghanistan instead of destroying them. I have not seen any soldier of the NATO alliance who was engaged or participating in the destruction of the poppy fields in Afghanistan. And when soon after, when this problem have appeared, from Afghanistan, we asked NATO commanders in Afghanistan soon after 2001. So why you're not suppressing this kind of menace in Afghanistan? Because you're just controlling everything: airspace, heavy-duty roads, any facilities, transportation. And the answer was very, very stupid and not acceptable. They answered to us, we do not have specific mandate to destroy poppy plantations in Afghanistan. Well, probably their answer was right. They didn't have such a mandate during that time. But who is preventing you guys to write down this kind of mandate instructions to destroy laboratories for production of heroin and opium, etc., to destroy poppy plantations? So I suspect that it was an artificially an artificially gimmick to give a lot of money to spoil the young generations in adjacent areas surrounding Afghanistan and put it across other European countries, for example. I remember ex-Prime Minister of the Great Britain, of the United Kingdom, Tony Blair, who said the Afghan heroin can be found easily in the streets of London when he was the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. Look, how far. Regis?
Well, I'm glad you presented this particular information on this particular point of view, because it's a very important issue. And it is another one of those issues that complicates what the United States military was doing in Afghanistan for these 20 years and what the CIA has been doing there and has been doing in several other places in the world in previous conflicts. So I'm glad that you brought that up. I have one last question.
Yes, please go ahead.
On August 31st, the United States left quickly.
Yeah.
And left all of that military hardware behind, weapons, guns, everything. What has been the view, the opinion of, let's say, Russian Federation, President Putin, his administration? And secondly, the people in Russia pay much attention to that. And what was their conclusion on America leaving that way, being ridiculed all over the world and all over the United States? As you know, it's a huge issue. What's the perspective from Russia?
Well, the majority of Russians, as I can understand, sitting here in Moscow, that time regarded this kind of rush or flight of the American troops, and just leaving a lot of military hardware in Afghanistan, either destroyed or not destroyed and physically capable to be used, and left a lot of the Afghans who helped the American military contingent and other military contingents of other NATO countries to stay in Afghanistan, to operate in terms of linguistic and other matters. We regarded this as a very bad behavior of the great power like the United States of America. So, and if we compare it with our withdrawal in 1989, that was completely, totally different. We have announced this. We have announced this after the Geneva agreements reached between us and Afghanistan at that time and Pakistan and the international community of the United Nations organization through the mediation of Diego Cordoves from Ecuador by nationality. So, it was a very grave mistake that Washington sent troops in Afghanistan in 2001. And it was the double gravest mistake when Washington just pulled back its troops in such a hurry, in such a, weak and unpleasant way. So I would be very happy if Joseph Biden, as the President of the United States of America, will never repeat this kind of aggression against any country all over the world. Or not necessarily him by himself, but all other American presidents who might appear after Joseph Biden's presidential power will cease to be. But still, I understand that while addressing the nation on the Afghan affairs, he said that the United States government will never use military power to conquer any other nations and to change the regime in the country. I'm not quoting him, I'm just reflecting the main message. But still, currently, I do not understand why only militarily? Why not politically? And what about militarily concerning Afghanistan only, but what about other countries? Look at the current Iraq today, when we are talking. The American troops have illegally occupied a number of areas in Iraq in violation of the UN Charter and without advice and consent, the resolution of the UN Security Council. Why they are staying in Iraq still? It runs counter to what President Joseph Biden said concerning potential US military involvement in the future into domestic affairs of foreign countries, unspecified by him. And political infiltration, political aggression of Washington into domestic affairs of many countries still underway.
Yeah, so, absolutely.
That's a double standard from Mr. Joseph Biden.
Well, you're absolutely right. With somewhere around 800 bases in close to 100 countries, if this is not trying to influence domestic policy, economic policy, then I don't know what does. But it's really a very blatant contradiction, and it's double speak. They say one thing, but they do another. And the United States has done that for a long time. I want to ask you this. Do you feel that the United States has lost credibility, has lost prestige, and has lost influence in the EU, and not only the EU, but around the world? And will they have to pay a price for that?
Yeah. Yes, Regis, you're right. The United States government, previous government, because the troops, the US GIs have been sent to Afghanistan in 2001 lost prestige, authority, positive image, and people all over the world, if they provided they are sober-minded, not biased, but real personalities based on realities, they have seen that America is not possible to rule the world, to rule other countries anymore. And the system of unilateral diktat in Russian of the US military political circles and establishment will gradually cease to be in the future. What the United States can do is to proliferate positive experience they have gained without military and political infiltrations, aggressions, occupations, but through normal means, via communication, via exchanging people-to-people contacts, etc., etc. Asking tourists to come to see the United States, picturesque places and experience, positive experience. But unfortunately, it will not happen in our daily life, Regis.
Yeah. You know, I met this past week with a Russian man who's I'm not going to mention the name here in this show, but he has been very well respected in Ukraine during the Soviet Union. He worked there. He's respected in many other countries around the world. And he's a very well-known geopolitical and political analyst. And he said to me over coffee on Monday of this past week, the parallels between the Soviet Union having spent the financial, political, military cost in Afghanistan led to the fall of the Soviet Union. He said he believes the same thing is happening to the United States now. Economically bankrupt, trillions of dollars in debt. They keep printing money with nothing to support it. He sees a country that's divided. He sees a government that he described as being not only dysfunctional, but not representative of the people. And he said that he's convinced that the United States will suffer an economic collapse, maybe worse than what the Soviet Union went through. What are your thoughts?
Well, who knows? I'm not a person of a Cassandra type. So from Greek myths. Yeah, but nevertheless, I have seen that during this only 2 wars of the United States, in Iraq and in Afghanistan, the US taxpayers have spent not for peanuts even, but for nothing, for zero, 2.3 trillion US dollars in Afghanistan, and twice as much, that is 4 trillion US dollars in Iraq. But how many in Syria, in Libya, in Somalia, etc., in Central and South America? I don't know why people are so cruel, why they cannot live amicably and peacefully, and to make the nations flourish till universe. But they create situation that there are still too many people undernourished, killed, crippled, became refugees or internally displaced persons, etc., etc., terrorists. So something is it has been done in a wrong way, in a very dangerous way. And unfortunately, the world community has not found the cure-all from this dangerous path, leading us to catastrophe, blundering into a disaster, as the ex-defense minister, Secretary of Defense of the United States once observed. I mean, Robert McNamara, blundering into a disaster. He used this term, colloquial term, in terms of nuclear weapons, but there are much more dangerous things like nukes. After 1945, no nukes have been used in the world, thanks God. But there are much dangerous method of extermination of human races without nuclear weapons.